What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the Tobu Fitness Podcast. This is episode number 26. Got a recurring guest on. We're bringing back Cam Brock for this one. Cam, how's it going? What's new?
It's going well. I just went to Gabby's Dollhouse live over the weekend with my kids, so something for everyone out there listening to be super jealous of. And yeah, just as usual, that off-season grind, just preparing for 5 months away from now when we finally take the field for the 2026 season.
Sweet. We got Manny Eckert from Seattle Sockeye with us too. He's been here for the last couple episodes. Manny, how's it going?
It's going fantastic. The winter coaching season is starting. Coaching two high school teams. One of them has a lot of very experienced ultimate players, and the other one has a lot of very inexperienced athletes. So excited to have those two opposite ends of the spectrum.
Heck yeah. So we got a pretty good episode lined up here. We'll get into some updates from Cam, right? Some questions for Cam, but really the big thing that we want to tackle in this episode is the great debate between club and pro. Right? We get a lot of questions about which one's better, which one people prefer, and so we've got two people kind of on opposite ends of the spectrum. So I'm kind of excited to dig into this. But Cam, do you want to give people a little bit of an update about what's going on with your season? I know you played with Hustle last season, going back to the Alleycats. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. So spending a year in Atlanta was certainly interesting. Got to play with some new players, first time playing for a team, whether it's club or UFA that wasn't in Indiana. Wasn't the first opportunity I've had to do that. Like I had an opportunity to play with High Five back in the day. I'm sure I could have gone and tried out for Machine or some other, team near the Indy area. Just never did. Never really was interested in that. But after a tumultuous, I will say, 2024 in Indy, I was kind of ready to maybe try something new. And luckily, Atlanta opportunity presented itself. So got to meet some really great people, play with some like amazing players. Like it is wild, just like playing on a team like Atlanta where there is just so much talent and athleticism, like just across the board. And like even going to player like 30, 32, even like, it's like you could take those, like there's probably like 4 or 5 guys that never even saw the field in Atlanta that I think would be a top 20 player on, most teams. And, just the depth of talent was kind of crazy to see. But, like it wasn't perfect. And I think like you from a distance, sometimes you can be like, man, like some of these teams just have everything all together. And there were certainly parts of being in Atlanta where I was like, man, this part runs way smoother. Like some of even just the off field operations, like this runs really smooth here. But then, like every other organization, it has its warts and there are things that can be improved upon. And, so it's really interesting to be able to get that new perspective from a new type of team. And kind of be able to bring that back to Indy now with just like a little bit more knowledge of how things work in other places. And also, coolest thing, I did not lose any division games while I was there. So the only team in the South that I've ever lost to actually is Atlanta. So I'm yet to beat Atlanta, but I am yet to lose to any other team in the South. So I think overall it's a pretty fair trade.
What takes you back to the Alleycats then?
So there's a couple of things. Like first off, all the travel was pretty hard on my wife, and that put extra work on her with our 2 kids. So for those that don't know, I've got a kindergartner now. So I've got a 5.5-year-old and a 2.5-year-old, and they're great, but they require a lot of work and a lot of attention. And I give as much of that to them as I can, as often as I can. And during the summer, I'm a teacher, so I do spend all day with them while my wife's at work. So I get a lot of time with them, but then obviously I was traveling to Atlanta. So every time I went for a game, I was gone for about 24 hours, which doesn't seem like a huge deal, but it's like my wife has worked all week. And then On Saturday, I'm leaving her for 24 hours, getting back, leaving Saturday morning, getting back Sunday morning. So it's like a whole day of her weekend where she could have had at least some time to relax is now like super busy because she's got she's got both kids. There's really not a lot of downtime. There's not a lot of time for just her. So that was definitely part of it, like just being able to relieve some of that from her. I really don't like having to miss things. Obviously, being an out of town player, I wasn't able to attend everything for Hustle. I even wasn't able to attend every game because I made a deal with my wife, like, hey, I'm not going to play in every game to kind of balance out the fact that I am going to be gone for longer when I go to a game. And I'm not going to get to it too much because I'm not trying to like drag anyone under the bus, but like there was just like the way the season ended was kind of sour for me. Like it wasn't like a great playoff experience. I felt like things could have been handled better. And I know I wasn't alone in that. And I think, when you're a competitor and things don't end the way you want them to, there's always going to be like you're going to look at everything through a microscope and you're going to be looking for all the things you wish you could have changed or you wish would have been different and all that. That being said, like these were things that that I felt maybe should have been different even before we had gotten to the playoffs. And I know it's always frustrating when you just feel like there's things you could have done differently. But overall, like it was a very positive experience. I learned a lot. I felt like I grew a lot. I felt like I showed my adaptability as a player. Like I completely changed my role for that team and what I felt like the team needed, which was not for me to go score goals all the time because there's plenty of people on the team that can do that. And they needed me. I felt what they really needed for me was to basically what I would refer to as making them eat their vegetables, which is like, I'm going to be making sure we're swinging the disc. I'm going to make sure that there's solid movement all the way up the field. That required me sacrificing some personal, like my personal statistics, like took a dump. Like if you were to like look, you would see like, oh, what happened in 2025, right? But like for me, it's all about whatever is best for winning. I felt like what was best for winning was for me to make sure that we were eating our vegetables, that we were swinging the disc and moving it, and that I was available in those spaces because it was easier for me to adjust to what everyone else was doing than for, I felt like, 19 other players to try to adjust to what I do. So I just kind of slotted myself in where I thought was like the best for the team. And I think it showed. I think when I was on the field, especially in the latter half of the season, like it just showed that the offense was flowing a little smoother and that things were a little easier for us. And I had my highest completion percentage of my career. I was at like nearly 98%, I think, which is awesome. So that was a bit of personal growth, I guess, for me. But I was ready to get back to Indy when I saw the new coach. Like I was really excited. And the reason I left wasn't because of like a talent disparity or anything like that, which I know some people thought like, oh, all those people retired, so Kim left. I'm like, that wasn't why I left. Like there were some other things going on, reasons why I left. But I'm really excited to get back. These guys are working really hard. I think there was a lot of youth on the team last year, and I think a lot of those young guys clearly weren't ready to have the amount of like pressure and like weren't ready to be the guy yet at the UFA level. But I think what you do see, if you look closer at the Alleycats games, which I know a lot of people weren't looking very closely at them because they were out of the playoffs pretty early last year. But if you look, like, I think the best measuring stick is their first game of the season was at Pittsburgh. Their last game of the season was home against Pittsburgh. And look at the difference in the scores in those two games. Look at the difference in the statistical categories like completion percentage and things like that. And you can see the growth that happened from beginning of season to end of season. And I think that's what happens. And Manny, you're coaching a team of a bunch of inexperienced guys, and you're going to see the same thing where their first real competitive tournament, they're going to be really bad and they're going to probably be really excited and they're going to give a lot of energy, but the results aren't going to quite be there. And then comparing that to where they go at the end of the season, because they're so new and they're going to grow so fast, you're going to see a completely different team. And I kind of felt like that's what I was seeing with the Alleycats last year. And, we have some guys coming back. We've already signed Xavier Payne, which is awesome. I'm not going to mention any names right now because nothing is super official, like signed in ink or anything. There's some other people that I'm very excited about who may be returning to Cats who have played before, and some people who have never played Cats who are considering maybe playing catch for the first time. We have Charlie Hoppus on board, which I love Charlie. I've spent many hours on the phone with him over the past few years. Was so excited when I found out that he was going to officially be a part of the Alleycats this year and, helping us out. So I think there's a lot to be excited about. And I think there's a lot left that the world doesn't know about, which will make it even more exciting.
That's awesome. Looking forward to it. And I know we did a cutting guide recently too.
Yep.
So I want to ask you a little bit about that. You kind of broke down a lot of the Alleycats footage from the last couple years. Like I mentioned to you before we started, it's still taking off. There's still a ton of people that are watching it, asking a lot of questions. Were there any big takeaways from you? Like, did anybody reach out to you? Any big questions? Anything you wanted to add? Things like that.
One interesting thing that happened. So I did have a clip in there from when we played Atlanta, and the person I scored on in that clip is Tyler Randall, who was like an amazing, I think first team all defense this year for UFA. If not, I mean, I know he played the most defensive points in the league this year. And I'm pretty sure he was on one of the all defense teams. He's like, that was on me. I didn't even realize, because in the clip it's a little blurry. You can't really read his name, and like he's wearing a hat, which I've never seen him wear a hat like as a teammate. So there's a lot of things but it's funny because some of the people in Atlanta who were defenders actually told me that they kind of got a new perspective on thinking about like how people cut. And there were some things they hadn't thought about. So that was interesting because I wasn't sure how many people would look at that who are higher level ultimate players who play, nationals level club, who play on UFA teams that are considered like top teams in the league. I wasn't sure how many of those people would look at it and be like, oh yeah, I learned something. So I thought that was like the coolest part, because I thought most of the people who would be looking at learning would be, newer or like kind of like mid-level players who are trying to like understand the game a bit better. But to know that there were people who are like names in Frisbee, like people who are known in Frisbee who like learned a thing or two, I was like, that was pretty cool. I don't know. I just think like I remember being taught how to cut. And it was like the same, and I'd be interested to hear from you too when you learned what you were told. But I feel like the basis of what I was told was like, try not to run straight to wherever you want to go. You throw a fake first, throw like, if you want to cut in, take a couple hard steps deep and then go in. Or if you want to go deep, a couple hard steps under and then go deep. I was told things like that. And I think those are very base level, like instructions. But I think having a soccer and basketball background, I was able to I'm like, no, I think like there's better ways to do this. Like I know how to use space. I know how to read defenders and like what space is actually open versus what space you think is open, because the open space is only open if the disc can get there, for instance. So if the disc can't get there, it's not an open space. It doesn't matter if there's no one around you. So being able to like think about it in that way and be able to process information super quickly, which is something that is a trainable skill, I thought was like a little bit more helpful than just saying, fake one way, go the other way. Because that was basically the instruction I got when I first started playing Frisbee.
I think the most interesting thing from that is like, I remember I shared this comment with you, but somebody was like, there wasn't really anything here on a micro level. And I don't know who that person is, but I would assume they're not like a top level player. And then to hear from what you're saying, where like the top level players are the ones taking more away from it, it makes me wonder, like, if you're a top level player, are you able to decipher more information from that? Or are you a top level player because you have the humility to be like, I can learn from something from this? So that was really interesting to hear that people were taking stuff away.
Yeah, there's something called Dunning-Kruger theory, or right, like the less you know about something, the more you think you know about it, versus the more you know about it, the less you think you know, essentially. And there's like this spot, it's like somebody who studied photography for 20 years is like, man, I still have so much room to grow and get better, versus somebody who studied it for 20 hours is like, oh, I pretty much understand everything there is to know about photography now. Like I know what shutter speed is and, exposure and all this other stuff. And it's like, no, you don't know anything. And I think there might be a little bit of truth to that. Like somebody who's really invested hours and hours into Frisbee and is looking for like that way to take their game to the next level. You're not looking at that point for big, huge things that are going to completely change your game, right? You're looking for those micro things, those small things that like are going to make you 1% better than you were before. Because when you've been playing long enough, you're not going to find something that's going to make you 15% better. Like that thing does not exist. It's going to be a bunch of things that are really small gains that maybe eventually you can add up to a 15% increase, but that's going to take a lot of small things at that point rather than like one humongous thing.
Definitely. We had a question from Reddit too that I think is a good segue. They asked if you have a piece of learning or multiple pieces of learning about the game that elevated your play the most, something about defensive or offensive concepts, throwing, etc., anything like that.
Yeah. And that's a really hard question because I almost feel like you have to take it from like, you almost can't say like the one thing that from anything in Frisbee. It's like you almost have to think about it holistically or even break it down into parts where it's like, what's the one throwing thing? What's the one cutting thing? So I'll kind of do a couple of things. I think with throwing, the one thing is like Bo Kittredge was a great thrower. And when people hear that, first off, if the people are younger, they might be, who's Bo Kittredge? But for those ball knowers out there, Bo Kittredge, for a significant period of time, was considered the best player in Frisbee. And that dude, you would think if you don't know who I'm talking about, you don't know anything about them, one skill you would think they would have is like, oh, they must have like really great throws. Like they've got all the throws in the bag, they can huck it, or whatever. And Bo was not really that guy, but what Bo did consistently was complete the next pass. And I think there's a misconception about like what a great thrower is because most people think it's like you can throw the disc 80 yards or you have really good hucks or man, you can make this breakthrow. But at the end of the game, possession is king in Frisbee. So if you can make all those throws, but you're only completing, say, 91% of your throws, then like that's not great. But like if you can consistently move the disc into a spot that not only completes the pass, but also like continues the flow of the offense and makes the defense have to reposition and like adjust to where the disc is going. It doesn't matter if it's 40 yards downfield or 20 yards lateral or you're completing a 15-yard in cut or whatever. It's continuing the flow of the offense and making the defense have to continually adjust. And doing that quickly and efficiently, I think, like makes you a great thrower. So I unfortunately have the Tim Tebow problem, which is for years I was throwing in a suboptimal way with my flick. And I have thousands of reps throwing flicks the wrong way because no one at Ball State, which is where I went to college, really like taught me how to throw. They kind of just wanted me to be able to throw well enough to like complete the next pass. So no one really like corrected my form or helped me with any of that stuff. So I just have thousands upon thousands of reps throwing the wrong way. And over time, I have adjusted and like gotten closer to like something that's a little better. And so I'm never going to be a thrower like a Jonathan Nethercutt or a Manny Eckert for that matter. Right. But what I have developed is that like I can get in a round off on anyone. I can get the IO lane if you're taking the around away. I can hit a scoober. I can hit the hammer. I can complete things very comfortably in a decent enough range that it doesn't matter. If I throw a huck, it's going to be completed. But I'm just not going to throw them at the rate. For the same reason you don't want Draymond taking a ton of threes, even if he can hit one every once in a while. Even if Steph Curry is cold, you want Steph taking 10 threes. And every three Draymond takes is a three that Steph didn't take. The same way with me hucking. I can huck it. I think I was 2 for 2 last year. It was 100%. I'd rather have Austin Taylor huck it. I'd rather have Hayden Austin Knapp huck it, right? Like I'm going to give it to guys who are like proficient at this and can do it a little more dynamically than I can. So, and as far as cutting goes, cutting is all about timing. You can be slower, less agile, and everything else. Your defender can have every athletic advantage on you. If you know where the disc is going, know where the movement's heading, and can time in rhythm and get to the spot at the exact right moment, you will be able to get open on people who are athletically at an advantage, because they are constantly having to react to you, which gives you that advantage that you need if you are a less athletic, less agile player against somebody who is more physically dominant than you. So, and I think we've all probably played with guys who are super explosive athletes who are not great at playing offense, who are not great at cutting. And it's because that understanding of the offense and the timing and the spacing is not there. When you understand those things, you are working on a different level of frisbee than everyone else. So, and you always obviously want to be more athletic, you want to be faster, you want to be all those things. But if your understanding of the game isn't there, then those things will result in you being faster, but it will probably also result in you being to the wrong spot at the wrong time, just a little faster than you would have been there at the wrong time, the wrong spot before. So you need that understanding piece of spacing and timing more than anything else. So focus on getting more athletic, but if you're not also focusing on understanding the game more, you're not going to get there.
I think that's a great point you made about throwing, coaching a lot of younger players, a lot of people who are just starting out with ultimate, especially at the youth level, are really obsessed with just being able to throw it really far. And that is definitely a valuable skill that has a place in ultimate. And if you look at all the top teams in the world, most of them have like a player or a couple players who can just throw it really far. But by far, like, what's way more important is just getting really consistent with passes that are like 15 yards around the disc, or even less distance, like even 5 to 8 yards. Because if you're a really great athlete, like a Bo Kittredge or whoever else, like, you really just need to be able to reset the disc super consistently.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also curious if you have any advice for players in like getting better at those spacing elements and like kind of spatial awareness elements, who don't have any film available of themselves playing, because like realistically the majority of ultimate players out there don't have those resources.
Yeah, I can relate to that because like there's like 2 videos total of me playing frisbee in college, maybe. Like this is like, and now it's like if you're playing college anywhere decently good, you have film probably, right? So I get that. I think one thing, I mean, I will point you to the cutting guide, just because like I do cover a number of like scenarios in there and like situations. But I think one thing, I was talking to Charlie Hoppus about this the other day. I was like, you know what? And I was like, tell me if I'm crazy. And he's like, no, I don't think you're crazy. I think you're onto something here. Something I can tell you if someone is going to be very good at cutting by how they navigate a grocery store. And it sounds silly, but here's why. We've all been in this situation. You're in a grocery store and there is somebody who has parked their cart in the middle of an aisle such that nobody can get around them, right? Like the aisle is blocked off. It's really annoying. It's really frustrating. These people lack the awareness of what's going on around them. And I would say my general experience from being a teacher and just being around, 1,200 middle schoolers every day, and having gone in and out of stores for, 37 years now, just turned 37 this week, old man. So, if you don't, I'm like hyper aware of my surroundings at all times. Like I'm hyper aware of like the path I need to take and if I'm blocking somebody and who's behind me even and who's off to the side of me. And like, so when I navigate a grocery store, I'm very efficient in my movement while also making sure that the people around me can like get to where they need to go. Like that's very important to me. I'm trying to be conscientious of other people. Right. And like, I'm doing that at all times of the day. How many people, hand up right now, are the person blocking off the grocery aisle? Like way more people than probably want to admit, right? Who's the person who is walking slowly, and taking up too much space in the hallway when they could be moving off to the side if they want to walk a little slower so that people can get around them. Like these little things, they sound silly, but like it's all about just awareness of what's going on around you. And when you are playing Frisbee, the biggest thing you can do to improve your cutting is just to be aware of like where everyone is, or as many of the people that matter are. And some of that has to, because there are 13 other people in the field with you, come from being able to predict where people are going to go before they go there. How do you do that? Well, you know your offensive system, you know who's supposed to be cutting next based on the offensive system, you know where your thrower can actually throw the disc to. Do they have good breakthrows? Do they have insights? Do they have arounds? Can they throw the disc only about 20 yards, or can they launch it 60 yards down the field? Like, it's about knowing all of these things all the time. And that takes a lot. So if you are newer and you're trying to improve in this area of awareness and knowing where the disc should go and whose turn, who should be cutting, and where the disc actually can make it to based on the defense that's being played, you need to prioritize something every time you go out and play. Like today, when I play, my focus is going to be on knowing exactly when it is my time to cut. And you are going to be hyper fixated on just your timing of when you cut. Maybe you don't always end up going to the right spot. Maybe you should have gone to the break side and you went to the force side. Maybe you were actually really open for an in cut, but you had already decided you were going to cut deep and you weren't open because they already had that space covered. Whatever. But you need to pick something that you want to focus on, and focus on that, not just for like a practice, but like multiple practices in a row, until you get to the point where that thing becomes natural for you. And it's just one of those things that it is just like any other skill. It is repetition. And you need to get to the point where you're like, oh, wait, I just made that cut at the exact right time, and I wasn't even thinking about it. Like, it just happened. Rowan McDonald, I think, said this in one of his videos. I'm pretty sure this was him. So, a few years back, he said, like, if you're ever watching film, you can watch film of other people and close your eyes during when the point's happening, and then open them up a few seconds later and see if the people ended up in the spots that you thought that they were going to go to. That's a great way to do it, where it's not film of yourself, but like if you know how a vert stack works, and vert stacks mostly have the same principles to them no matter who's running them, then you can say, okay, like, oh, I see we just got an in cut. The person at the back of the stack should be the next person making the cut. Close your eyes. You noticed before that the last person that stacked, the defender, was way deep. So if you open your eyes, you're expecting to see this guy coming under for an open in cut, right? And if that isn't what happened, or if something weird happened, people are not in the spaces you're going to, okay, go back, watch the video, what did happen, and, figure out what the pattern is, what's going on here. The other thing you can always do, we all got phones nowadays. You can buy a tripod pretty cheap for like a phone holder. Film a practice. Like, find the best spot to put a camera, film the practice, see how people are moving. You might not have the best camera angles, but it's also going to be your practice. So you know what was happening, you know what you were doing. But you got to pick something to be hyper aware of it, because if you try to focus on 10 different things at one time and you're deficient in 9 out of those 10 things, you're going to be taking up way too much brain space. You're not going to be able to focus on anything. Pick one thing, focus on it till it's perfect, or as close to perfect as you're happy with, then move on to the next thing, then add step 2 in. And it's easier said than done. It's time consuming. It's going to feel like it moves really slow, but all things worth doing well are going to take time to do well. It's not going to happen immediately. It's not going to happen overnight. The other thing you can do, Manny, is if you're playing on a team where you have this coach, kind of like Manny Eckert, who has a wealth of knowledge, is talk to your coach before practice. Let them know what you're focusing on. Let them know what you want feedback on, and your coach can do that for you. If you don't tell other people about it who are knowledgeable, then you're missing out on an opportunity for those people to help you.
Yeah, that actually is really helpful to like come to your coach with a really specific item that you want feedback on, because a lot of the time kids will come up to me and be like, okay, like the end of practice or a game, what could I have done better this game? And there are 20 in the mid-20s for kids on this team, and it's like, I don't remember a single thing you did this game. I'm going to be honest. But if that player comes to me before the game and is like, okay, can you watch my reset defense this game? Then I'll know, like, okay, I can come up with like 3 or 4 instances of you playing reset defense and see what I noticed in those times.
Yeah, it's like, it's one of those things I think a lot of people just don't think of ahead of time. Like, I want feedback on this thing, but yeah, like you said, you're a coach with 20 something kids on the team. You're only going to remember so much of what each individual person did. And, I've coached 3 different high school Frisbee teams or 4, 3. And, yeah, it's like when there's just so much going on. And a lot of times as a high school coach, you don't have assistants. And so it's all you. And even if you do, you have one assistant. Okay, now you have 2 people to watch 20 something people. That's still a lot. It's funny because in 2019 was my first year being a captain for Alleycats, and one of the pieces of feedback we got, the captains got at the end of the season, was that they didn't. Some of the younger guys, especially, didn't feel like the older guys were doing enough to help them improve in like certain areas, and they weren't getting enough feedback from older players. And my response to all of them was, not a single one of you asked me a single question the entire season, because you have to understand, I'm out there trying to get better too. So like, during the practice, I'm focusing on like, what am I doing? What is the team, like, what is my line of players doing? Right. If any one of them would have been like, hey, Cam, can you like watch me today? And like you said, give me some feedback on my reset defense or whatever else, I would have been more than happy to do that. But it's hard. There's so much, like, how many different skills are there going on during a Frisbee game? Like, so many different things you could comment on and multiply that by the amount of players. I mean, it's insane. You know what? And you actually, Justin, you can chime in on this though, because I know that you are, of the 3 of us, the newest to Frisbee. So when you have wanted to get better, have you ever made the fatal mistake of not asking somebody ahead of time and then asking them after a practice or after a tournament, hey, did you notice anything I could get better at, without giving them a heads up ahead of time?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's what I kind of default to. Even now, I admit that's probably what I default to, which definitely makes it tough. Yeah, because I guess the person just doesn't really know what to specifically look for. Also, I feel like if you ask that way, you only ever see like what like oddly stuck out. And
Yeah, I
so
was just about to say, like, if someone asked me that at the end of the game, I'm going to notice like the biggest moments in the game when this person threw a crucial turnover. And maybe they threw a turnover on a throw that it's like they're actually pretty good at that throw. But I just remembered that one turnover that they threw. So I'm going to be like, okay, you need to work on this throw. And also those moments often like tend to be negative ones, when positive reinforcement of things people are doing well is also really important.
100%. It's like, I'm a teacher, so like I get these questions constantly from students about like, I'm an English teacher, so they'll ask about this thing or this thing, and it's kind of the same thing. They'll come and ask me after we've done like 20 practice problems, and like they want to know, hey, what can I do to get better? And it's like, gosh, that's such a big, vague question. Like what can you do? There's like 5 million things you can do to get better at this thing. Yeah, and I think the other thing is, though, people have good intentions. I think a lot of times when people are asking for feedback after tournament, they feel, after tournament or practice, they feel like they could have done something better, but they might just not be sure what that is. So they ask the question. So like the question is well intentioned, right? It's like, I want to get better. And I think usually when people ask that, especially if it's right after a tournament or a practice is over, it is from a place of either I don't feel like I played that well today, or I feel like there's things I could have done better, but I'm just not sure what they are. Or it can also come, because I've been in this spot too, I feel like I'm doing everything I can to help this team reach its potential, and it still doesn't feel like it's enough. Like, what is another weight I can throw on my shoulders, because I feel like I need to carry more of a load than I'm already carrying? Because I've been in both of these situations before where I felt like I'm already carrying a ton, but can I carry more? And I've been in spots where I'm like, I just feel like I could have done better today, but I'm not really sure I feel like I'm at the point now where I'm like, I can look back and, with all my experience and be like, hey, I didn't play as well as I wanted to today, but like I can go look at the film and I will be able to like figure out why. But that's much harder when you're like in year 3 and you're trying to learn all this stuff, because a lot of it just comes with experience. It comes with experience of being in a lot of situations and understanding that situational side of Frisbee.
I think even something I can probably relate to more is like the injury side of things. Like everybody asks, what should I be doing once they've already torn their ACL or once they've already sprained their ankle, stuff like that. But nobody really asks about it from like a proactive perspective. And so I think that's exactly right. And even like, especially with injuries, like people think about injury prevention as all these kind of like fancy rehab type exercises, but really the best way to be prepared or to prevent injuries is like make sure that you are sprinting, make sure you are cutting, make sure you're doing all of like the super high risk injury things. And it kind of sounds like that too. Like instead of just trying to like do these small little things to like prepare yourself, like a lot of times it's just dive into the deep end, make sure you have like the experience and then kind of learn from that too.
Yeah, that's like the post I see on Reddit the most that like drives me nuts is like, what can there's like, it's like they kind of go together in my mind, but like, what can I do to prevent injuries? And, or then there's like the other side of that, which is what can I do to fix the injury I already have? And like, I always want to say, build a time machine, go back to October when you were sitting on your butt for 3 months and actually move. Like when I run into people, so I'm 37, I just turned 37 last week. And when I don't run into a lot of people from high school because I went to high school in Lafayette, which is about an hour away from where I live currently in Indianapolis, or outside of Indianapolis. And on occasion, I do run into someone from high school. They're like, you look the same as you did in high school. And I'm like, yeah, it's literally just, I kept moving. Like I haven't stopped moving since I could move. Like I'm just continuing to run and work out. And like, I don't take a month off or 2 months off or 3 months off like some people do when Frisbee season's over. Like for me, I'm always either in Frisbee season or I'm in training for the next Frisbee season, and there is no off time. And like I've never had a serious injury. Now some of that is probably obviously luck or genetics or something else. Like I'm not going to act like if you just do everything the way I did it, like you're never going to get injured. But I've never had a serious injury, and 100% a reason for that is because I am training all year. I am doing stuff all year. I'm being active all year. I'm fortunate enough to be on the Tobu clan. You're my trainer. You've been my trainer. It's been 2 years. I was just thinking about it today. I have been on with you for I think officially 2 years. It was sometime around mid-November in 2023 when I started doing Tobu, and it's been great. But even before I was on Tobu, I was finding other people who could give me strength and conditioning programs. I was making sure I was out running, doing sprints, doing other explosive exercises. You don't want to get injured. It starts like today, right? It actually started yesterday, but like you can jump on today because you can't do anything about yesterday. And you just keep moving and you keep working out, and you don't take a month off, and you don't do those things. And then that's also when I see people like, how do you get in shape? Well, if you never fall out of shape, it's easier to get into shape. Like maybe you're not in game shape right now in November. Some people, that's fine. If you're still like working out and stuff and getting exercise, you're at least not going to be out of shape. And, once you get out of shape, getting in shape sucks. So the key is like, once you do get in shape, just like maintain it. That is so much easier than taking a bunch of time off and then trying to work back into it. It's way harder, and something I never want to do. I've never had to do it, and I don't want to do it because every time I see someone try to do it, it works out very poorly.
I've got a question for Cam. What is your least favorite exercise that Justin has made you do in the past 2 years?
Oh gosh, which one do you want me to pick? Okay. I hate, I'm like blanking the name of it. I feel like I hate it so much that I have stricken it from my memory. And this is something I did before you as well. And when I switched to you, I was like, it wasn't on my programming for a while. And I was like, oh, sweet. So you're going to have to help me with the name of it because I can't remember. So it's like where you're like essentially doing a side plank, but you have your
Copenhagen's.
Yes. I hate Copenhagen's so much. Like Jeremiah Branson and I were both on a program. This was before, so this would have been 20 in the 20 preseason of 2023. So I didn't join with doing Tobu Fitness stuff till November of 23. So this would have been like January 23 and like all preseason leading into that season. And Jeremiah Branson and I kind of, he was new to the team that year, and we were kind of became like workout texting buddies because he was in Knoxville. So like he wasn't really around any other guys in the team, at least not a lot. There was a few guys, I guess, but not as many. So we would text each other about our workouts, and we both hated Copenhagen's so much. And on Copenhagen Day, we were always just like hate texting each other about like, but we're like, oh, made it through the Copenhagen's, like the rest of the workouts, no problem. Like I just hate those so much. I imagine everyone hates them because I haven't met anyone who's like all about Copenhagen's, but man, like I hate that exercise. I haven't had to do it in a while, Justin. So like if you want to look for a way to torture me, throw those back onto the workout plan. But I know they're good. Like it's not like some exercises you don't like because you're like, there's just those exercises that everyone feels like, I don't know the benefit of this, or like I feel like this is not something I need to be doing. A Copenhagen, I 100% see the benefit of it. I 100% know why I'm doing it, but I still hate it so much.
Copenhagen's are definitely up there for me, but I would much rather do a Copenhagen plank for 20 seconds than an iso long lunge holding 60-pound dumbbells for 20 seconds.
No, I'd give me the iso long lunge all day, which is not my favorite, but I did like our little rivalry we kind of had going back and forth of that when we both kind of started picking up with Justin. It kind of gave me a little extra motivation on that exercise. So that I actually liked that one. Although there was a day where I was doing it, and I was doing it in the weight room at the middle school, and right outside of the weight room was the wrestling practice that was going on for middle school. And I was doing, like 60-pound dumbbells or something stupid, and I was trying to hold it for like 2 minutes, or I don't even remember exactly the circumstances. I just know that I had to get to a certain time, and I was not going to drop before I got to whatever the time was I had set in my head. And and I was screaming, like yelling at myself to like make it, this extra like 20 seconds. And I'm like, somebody from the wrestling practice is going to like think I'm like dropped like 400 pounds on my body or something. Like I'm just screaming in here like a madman. And I actually had to open the door after that just to like but then I'm like, I'm okay. But I was just, I don't know, man. You're crazy if you'd rather do Copenhagen's than that.
Well, specifically just the one, just the iso long lunge with the really heavy dumbbells. Like normal iso long lunge, I would still rather do a Copenhagen plank for 20 seconds than an iso long lunge for 3:30.
Well, see, my first program I was on, I had to do Copenhagen's for a minute. And I was like, just dying I remember when I first started, I was like, I couldn't make it a minute, like with good form. I was like drooping, and I was like, so I'd have to do like 30 seconds, take like a breather and like get back up and do 30 more seconds. Cause I would lose my form halfway through. But yeah, 20 seconds wasn't as bad. Although I don't want to do a Copenhagen for 5 seconds. So even 20 seconds, like, screw this.
I think we'll have to bring that back. We just did the video, or Manny and I just did a video earlier in the week about his off-season programming. So we might have to bring back the ISO long lunch, or I guess the Copenhagen rivalry. Maybe we'll do that.
Oh, I'm gonna lose. I'm gonna get everything I can though, even if I lose. I'm gonna go for gold, even if I end up with bronze or some other medal that people haven't heard of.
I've never done a Copenhagen plank for a minute, so
it's not fun.
If you have, then you're off to a good start.
That was like 2.5 years ago though, so I don't think I got that. I don't know if I got that in me right. I'll try it though. I'll try it. It'll be ugly, but we'll do it.
Let's get into the big topic. I think a lot of people are probably here for
Sure.
So club versus pro. Cam, you're representing pro. No, that's your preference. Manny, you're representing club. You guys want to each start with maybe like a minute or so, just kind of giving a quick summary about why it is that you prefer that.
Manny, you're the regular guest on this podcast, so I feel like you should start us off.
Okay, two main reasons why I prefer playing club to pro. And first of all, I want to differentiate the pro league that we're talking about, because a lot of the time in this conversation, it kind of erases the women's pro leagues, the WUL and the PUL. So I want to make very clear that I'm talking about the UFA versus men's club. I've never played in the PUL or a WUL, so I can't speak on how the experience is in those leagues as a player. But playing in the UFA, I vastly prefer the rule set and the culture in Club Ultimate. As far as rule, I feel like for both of those things, you could break them down into so many subcategories. But for the rule set, I think the biggest thing, well, the two biggest things are the size of fields and the refs. And as far as the field goes, I think a bigger field gives a bigger advantage to pure athleticism over more skill, I guess. And even though there's a gray area between athleticism and skill, I think that someone who is really fast but does not have the cutting instincts that we talked about earlier on this pod will do better in the UFA versus club, or someone who can throw really far but not that accurately will do better in the UFA versus club. Defensively, my first year playing for Cascades, defense was just really miserable to me. It's so hard to actually feel like you have an impact on the fields. Of course, it is an extra challenge, but for me, I just gave up and decided to focus on playing club instead of rising to that challenge of trying to figure out defense in pro. As far as the refs go, I really dislike not having any agency to make my own calls. I think Ultimate is inherently an extremely difficult sport to ref, more so than other field sports, or basketball or whatever, because there is a huge playing area, but very small amounts of contacts have a huge influence on the outcome of the game. I remember there would be times when in club you can call contact, which I think is great, and I guess you can make the argument that that's abusable, but I don't think that happens very often in club. But in pro, if a defender just taps the disc while you are pivoting or trying to throw, even just one finger on the disc makes a large impact on the throw that you're trying to throw. And a ref is really unlikely to see that. And as far as the integrity rule goes, I don't think it's really utilized very often. So I guess that's my frustration with the refs, not having my own agency. And then there's also a cultural aspect of feeling like the league is really centered around, marketing individual players. Whereas part of the reason I play Frisbee is, to push myself as an individual, but more to work with my team towards a common goal. I'm not saying that's not done in the UFA, but I feel like in the UFA, I've experienced a lot more of an obsession with individual stats and individual highlights being posted, which I think detracts from the team camaraderie that I feel. I guess those are my feelings summed up.
All right. Club sucks. You're all dumb for I'm just kidding. I think the other thing that's important to note, and you mentioned it, we both played in both of these. I would still be playing club today if I were single and no kids. I'm 37, married, 5.5-year-old, 2.5-year-old, I had to choose. Like the amount of time to do both seasons it's a lot. So I don't want this to be like, I would play club, I guess is where I'm getting at. Now, that being said, I vastly prefer UFA. It was a very easy decision for me when we found out my wife was pregnant, and it was in July of 2019. So we were in the back half of AUDL then season. And I told her, I'll finish this club season and then I'll be done with club and I'll just do UFA. So things I really like about the UFA, some of it is like things I think you didn't even mention actually, or even touch on, which is like, I like most weekends, you do have double headers in the UFA, but I like being able to like have a home game 6 times a year. And like, I don't have to travel 5 hours to go play. I don't have to hop on a plane to go play. I'm in my city. I get to drive 20 minutes away, 30 minutes away, wherever our home field is from where I live, play and go home. It's pretty awesome. Like, that's nice. Especially as somebody who's married with kids. Like, it doesn't take up my entire weekend. I like that I don't pay for anything. Like, club's expensive, especially, I mean, Manny, you can attest to this. I've never played on a team like Sockeye that's like essentially at nationals like almost every year. That's expensive. Like, you got to fly all around the country. You got to book hotels. Like, all this is coming out of your own pocket. If you're lucky enough to be on a team that's got like some sort of like fund, which I know some teams have like people who kind of help out with expenses, but the reality for most teams is you don't. And even if you're on a smaller club team, you're still having to travel hours away, book hotels, pay for your food for the weekend, all those things. And that money adds up real quick. I remember somebody writing an article. I think it was someone who actually played Sockeye. This article is probably like 10 years old now. And he outlined all of his expenses for the club season. And it ended up being, keep in mind, this is 10 years ago, much cheaper atmosphere than we're in right now. It was like $7,500 to play club that year or something like that. That is so much. I don't have that kind of money, honestly. Like, I literally could not afford to play on a team like Sockeye. Even though my talent, my abilities say you should be playing on a team like Sockeye, I literally couldn't afford it. I'd have to have somebody fronting money for me. I love, one of my favorite parts about the UFA, and I think this is something that's changed a lot because, like, Manny, I'm going to guess at that point in the UFA when you were playing, there was not honestly a ton of, and it differs by city, but the amount of strategy and planning going into like coming up with a really solid defensive game plan to be able to directly impact your opponent, not like a general plan that you roll out against everyone, but like, hey, this is how we're going to attack this specific team. I know in a lot of places, and when you were playing, that wasn't happening. I think it's becoming more commonplace now.
Yeah, other teams were doing that, not us though.
Exactly. So you talk about I actually think defense in the UFA, honestly, is in a lot of ways easier than it is in club because of the rule set, but it requires that you have specific game plans. Because my biggest problem is I actually think in club offense it's too easy to hold. And we see this with the really high level teams where like they just don't get broken in games because you have a 10-second stall, which is an eternity. You have no ability to double team, which means that as a thrower, especially an elite thrower or somebody on these high level teams, like if you only have one person on the mark, you never have to worry about a second person. It becomes really easy just to get the disc to work kind of wherever you want to go with it because there is no ability to like throw a surprise double team or impact it some of these other ways. And because you have 10 seconds just feels when I would go from UFA club, it feels
a stall 10 and a 10 stall in club is like the same as a ref count at 7 stall in UFA, right?
I hear that a lot, and I think it's just not true. Like, it was a tangible difference going from getting stalled out in a UFA game to going and playing club and having forever. Because the other thing is, if that's going to be your argument, you can always call fast count. Like, so like, even if you felt like someone was kind of fast, you just call fast count and all of a sudden the problem's gone. I hate the player agency in club, honestly. I think it is too easy to abuse. I've been in way too many situations where it was abused. And all it takes is one player on the other team to abuse rules for it to completely just ruin the entire experience of playing in that game. It doesn't happen in every game, so I'm not going to act like it's a pervasive problem that happens every time. but I remember the note on Sockeye. This is before you were playing it, so you don't have to take the blame for this. The note I always heard on Sockeye is that they would make bad calls and they would just stick to it, and they would treat you like you were an idiot for like disagreeing with them. Like they were very elitist about it. And I was like, you know what? This sounds like people being mad because Sockeye is really good and they're just kind of jealous. Because, you hear stuff like that all the time. And for perspective, this was either 2018 or 2019 when I played against Sockeye. The only time I ever played against them. It was the year they won Natties. So whichever year that was. And everything I had heard came true in that game. I mean, they destroyed everybody. This was at ESC in Columbus, Ohio. They ran through that tournament. It didn't matter who, like, I think their closest game was like a 7-goal win. Like they just destroyed everybody.
Are you sure Sockeye went to ESC the year they won nationals?
It might have been, like I said, it might have been they did. It was because, and I don't know why, but they won Natties that year. This ESC had like machine and chain at it as well. Like it was very weird, the level of teams that were there. But regardless, everything I had heard was like coming true right in front of my eyes. We're in a game where we're not even being competitive with them. They're crushing us. And they're making these calls and like digging their heels in and talking to us like we're idiots. And I'm just like, I wanted this to not be true. And so like those situations, if a ref makes a bad call against me or a call I feel is bad against me, at least that person's impartial. Whereas when it's happening by like somebody who's actively competing against me and they're like digging their heels in, refusing to see any other perspective and just start to treat you disrespectfully on top of all that, like that feels so much worse to me than a bad call by somebody who's impartial. So I don't like the player agency for that reason. It's also just like, it's hard enough to play Frisbee and pay attention to everything at one time. And now you're going to make me make my own calls on top of it. Like you just can't do that effectively. Like you're all kind of guessing, and that's just the reality of it. But like, I really love in the UFA being able to game plan for a specific opponent, which is something you just can't do in club very often because you don't know who you're going to play. You find out your pools a few days before you go, then you have no clue who you're going to end up playing in bracket play. And even if you do, it's like you have potentially like 4 games that you're doing. So you can't, like in practice, you're not game planning for one team because you can't. You have to go out there and just see who ends up in front of you and have a general game plan for everybody, but not really anything specific that you can practice and put into play. And that is one of the beautiful things about sports I love, is being able to be like, change who you are and morph it to be the most successful in this game. I love it as a coach. I love it as a player. And you lose that in club because it just becomes a battle of attrition. Who's left standing in game 7 or 8 of the weekend? And, I always like Chain went to a tournament and like near the end when we were about to go to the playoffs, I think it was once we had made the playoffs, and it was before we played San Diego. And all I could think was, please don't get injured. And sure enough, I hear like, oh, so-and-so pulled a hammy, so-and-so like tweaked this. And I'm like, our bodies like are not meant to play 8 intense contests in, a 29, 30 hour period. Like that's not, by the time you get to the last game of the weekend, everyone's a shell of themselves. Nobody's competing at a high, like their high level, I should say. It might be higher than most people, but like you're not getting the best of anyone at that point. It is a battle of attrition. And there's like some training and stuff you can do to make sure that you are more ready for that than other people. But you're getting a watered down product at that point. And I guess the last thing, and I think this is an objective truth, the UFA is just so much more watchable. Like there's less time between points. You're not looking at people arguing back and forth about who knows what. And it turns out both people are wrong. And the worst thing they can do is mic them all up because nobody sounds smart or wise when they're going into those conversations. It's just like well, I think this happened. Well, I think this happened. And no one really knows. And I literally just can't watch club Frisbee even when I want to, even when my friends are playing in it, because I start watching it and then I'm sitting watching people talk for 2 minutes. And I'm like, okay, I'm over this. I'm done. So I just kind of refresh the score tracker just to keep track of scores, and that's about all I do.
I do have a fact-checking tangent that I'd like to.
Was it not ESC, or was it a different tournament?
Here's the thing. In 2019, Cam, Sockeye was not at ESC. But you know who else was at ESC? Seattle Voodoo. And I thought you might remember this because we played against each other at ESC.
Yeah, we did.
In 2019.
Yep, and that was in Rockford. Yeah,
that's right.
So it was 2018.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense because Sockeye did poorly at nationals in 2017.
Okay, so 2018, yeah, that was when it was in Columbus. Yeah, 2019, gosh, and of course it was in Rockford. So what happened? Games got rained out at the end of the first day because that happens every time a tournament's in Rockford.
I really disagree with the point you're making about game planning. For club nationals, we get our schedule like 3 weeks in advance. And that's a lot of time to make a lot of game plans. And the bracket path is somewhat unpredictable, but like, you know, we can prioritize who we want to scout in that time. And like, that's more than enough time to scout our pool play opponents. And then like, you don't really need that much time to scout. So like for us this year, after pool play, like we had a really solid game plan for those teams. Well, maybe not solid enough because we went 1-2, but we did pretty well in those games.
Sure.
And then we knew our pre-quarter the next morning. And then, so we had some people who just, you know, went straight back to the Airbnb or wherever, and then just worked on a scouting plan. And it worked really well that next morning. And so I think that scouting still is very much a big part of the top level of Club Ultimate. Maybe not, like definitely less so at tournaments that aren't nationals. And that's another piece that's like very debatable. You know, the regular season matters a lot more in the UFA than in club. And lots of people will say that the regular season doesn't matter in club, which is somewhat true.
Especially if you're at those bigger tournaments already, because obviously it's like, if I go to a small little tournament somewhere and we go undefeated, it's not going to move the needle that much because we didn't play any, you know, it's like the college football rankings, right? It's like, if you're not beating a really good team, then it doesn't really matter. And if you're losing to really good teams, then like that can sometimes be more beneficial than beating a really bad team.
Exactly. Like Machine didn't win a game until Pro Champs.
Oh yeah, they were awful out in Colorado. I remember hearing all about like how bad they looked, and then, you know, obviously at Natty's. And so I see your point. I also like, I think we're kind of hedged here because it's like, yeah, like you mentioned, it's really like one tournament you really can like do this scouting for. But you also like mentioned like, yeah, you don't get time to actually go practice this stuff. It's like, okay, we have to play this team tomorrow. So like we can come up with a game plan, but like you don't have time to like actually train yourself to be, here's exactly what we want to do. And now we've repped it out and we've like worked out the kinks, right? You have to like go in with a plan, hope it works. If it doesn't, you have to try to adjust on the fly, which is possible, but like with club games being to a point total or rounds that are fairly short in comparison to like the UFA game, like it can be really hard to figure out how to make those adjustments, what adjustments to make, and do them quickly enough to like impact the game. And so, yeah, you can do some general scouting. I love being able to like actually put it into practice and like all that stuff. And like you said, it's like an every game thing for me in the UFA, whereas like at the club level, it doesn't really matter most of the rest of the season. You're really more worried about yourselves probably in those earlier matchups than you are worried about the other team, because you're probably fitting in new pieces, seeing like how people are working together, maybe implementing some game plan stuff, but you also probably don't want to show it too early, would be my guess. Like if you have something up your sleeve, but
yeah, totally. Which is also my preference to focus on ourselves for the majority of the season and then not really scout until nationals. I guess I would argue that like any game plan that you're coming up with, most of the vast majority of those game plans, I think, are going to be like you're not, it's not going to be optimal for you to try something that's completely different from what you normally do. And like your game plan is probably always going to be centered around, even if you have a whole week to prep for the game in advance, like it's probably always going to be centered around things that you have practiced already. And you are just kind of moving the pieces around on the fields. Like this player is comparable to this player, how we played against them before, or maybe like, okay, when this player has a disc, we're going to sag every single time. But that's like, hopefully we've practiced our sagging the lane at that point, and like we know how to do that, and then we can just execute that in the game. And it's not going to take a lot of practice just to do that skill in a slightly different format.
I can somewhat agree with that. Yeah, I think it depends too on like, because like the one thing in the UFA that definitely is not standard is how much a team practices. Like some teams, literally season starts, practices end. Like there's just no practicing after that. So in those cases, what you're saying is like 100% true. It's like, I hope we rep this out enough in the preseason, and like we just kind of have to theoretically go in with like, this is what we're going to do, and like hope that our preseason practices were enough to like prepare us for this. One thing I like about Indy is because it hasn't traditionally been as much of like a travel team, although we have had pods of travel players. Is that we do have a week, at least a weekly practice. In 2018 and 2019, we actually had 2 practices every week. So like if we really wanted to like work on something, we had about 5 to 6 hours of practice time to like make adjustments, whether it was kind of like you said about us, like, hey, there's something we're not doing well that we need to work on, versus like, hey, there's this thing we want to do for this specific matchup that we want to do. So yeah, you're not wrong, because you're not going to do something that's like completely new that you've never done anything even close to it before. But I do think there is something to being like, hey, in our last game, we were never sagging the lane. And now in this game, we're going to be sagging the lane a lot, and like just training yourself for like all of your practice time leading up to that matchup of like, we're sagging to where it becomes like something you're not even having to think about, or like, oh crap, last game we weren't sagging, but now this game we are sagging. And like, it's those times where like one person doing the wrong thing might not lead to a score that throw, but we all know one person doing the wrong thing for one throw led to the break throw getting open, which then led to another break throw being open, which then led to the scoring throw, right? Like it's sometimes it's those things where it's just like, it was that second of hesitation. And that's where I do like to be able to rep things out. But as I also said, like in Atlanta, we weren't practicing during the season that often. We practiced like 3 times during the season. So there it was very like, here's a whiteboard, here's what we were going to try to do, hope we can show up and do it. So in that sense, it was more like club and kind of what you would do.
Here's another thing that is really debatable that everyone will have their own individual opinions on. And that is, I think everyone will agree that one UFA game is harder on the body than one club game.
Oh,
I
for sure.
think most people will disagree on what the ratio is. Like, is one UFA game worth 3 club games? Because if it is, then a double header, a road trip UFA game is like you go play a club tournament.
I think it depends on your role, because
Totally.
that's and the same thing goes for club tournaments, right? Like if you're playing on a club team and you're only playing like 5 points a game, then playing 8 games in a weekend is very doable. Like you're not putting as much stress on your body.
Also, you're saying 8 games. I haven't played 8 games in a weekend in like a really long, in a 2-day tournament. Is that okay? I think I don't know. I'm not sure. I'm trying to think of a tournament where we played 7 games this year. I think like 6 games is pretty like maybe 7. I think 6 is going to be most common.
So 6, okay. And I guess 7 would be like if you had to do a pre-quarters, right? You would probably play 7 if you made it. Yeah. If there was like a bracket that allowed you to like play enough games, I guess.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Like at ESC, basically. Yeah, I guess it's either 6 or 7. Yeah, but
yeah, so we can stick with 6. 6 is a safe number. Like if you go to a tournament, unless something's rained out, you're playing 6. So we can stick with that number. So I think I'm somebody who's a high volume point player in the UFA. Like, I wasn't really as much last year in Atlanta, but like I would venture to guess forecasts this year. I'm going to be playing 20 plus points a game. I think in 2022, I played about 25 a game. So if I played a doubleheader weekend, we're looking at 50 points.
And you're someone who runs a lot in your role on the field.
Now, my body, the other thing is like, what are you doing? Like, I'm not a guy who hits the ground a lot, for instance. So like for me, I don't get that wear and tear of like my body hitting the ground constantly that maybe a defender would get, because defenders have no concern for their bodies and just like fly out. Like I watched Lucas Ambrose play, and I'm like, how are you still like walking at the end of like a UFA game? Because he just hits the turf so many times throughout a game. I feel like he's just launching into the stratosphere. But yeah, your point, that is like a point that comes up a lot. I will say this. In my hardest played UFA games, like where I can like think to specific games where I had to really grind through a lot of points or was on the field a lot, doing a lot of running. There was actually a game I was wearing a stat tracker for Justin. That we had a game against Chicago where I logged just during the game. So this is not including warm-ups. I logged more than a 10K during the game. So we're looking at more than 6 miles of running. Some of that, of course, is running to and from the line, which is going to add, 40 to 50 yards every time I do that. But I played like 25 points. I had 75 touches or 75 throws in that game. I mean, it was a lot. And then I had a game in Pittsburgh the next day. And I was able to handle that. I was definitely not at 100% going to Pittsburgh. Like, you're never going to be the day after a game. My body was able to handle that, but I put so many miles on my body in the off season to prepare for stuff like this that I feel okay. But, I was probably at best 95% that next day at the start of the game. Like, there's no way I was at 100. I felt fine. We played like crap. I could tell some of my teammates didn't feel good at all. They were doing as little movement as possible. I would say, and I would agree with you, I think 2 UFA games is going to take more out of you. So we're talking about getting a diminished product. I actually do think the second game of a back-to-back can be way harder in the UFA than playing a full weekend. But I think it's also dependent on competition. You know this from maybe not as much now playing like elite level club, because it's like every tournament you go to has got a lot of really good teams at it. You're not going to tournaments with teams that aren't competitive with you probably very often.
Actually, most of the tournaments that Sockeye has been to the past couple of years, like we haven't been top 8. We haven't finished top 8 nationals until this year. So we have like most of our Saturdays have had games that weren't very competitive.
So the difference. Like, there's the difference between the competitive tournament. Like, I would say ESC when you were with Voodoo, that was probably a bunch of competitive games. Like, that was right. Versus when you're rolling through teams on the first day, not only are you playing less overall points as a team because the score is like 13-4 and you're only playing 17 total points, but you're getting more rest between those games because they're finishing faster. You're probably letting people who don't play as much play more points. The same thing happens in the UFA. Like, when we would play Detroit on the first game of a back-to-back, my offensive points are not very hard. Like, I'm not grinding through the way I would against a Minnesota defense, a Chicago defense. So even if we have 2 games, it's like that second game I feel so much better than I would in the second game if we played a really tough game the day before. I will say one thing I've been impressed with is I feel like recently, especially at championship weekend, it's like there is no easy game really, because the 4 teams that are there because they're the best teams in their division. And I have actually been pretty impressed with the level of play in the championship games, because those games are happening for some teams less than 24 hours after their first game, and they're handling it pretty well. But I guess that's why they're there in the first place, right? Like, they are an elitely conditioned team as well as an elitely skilled team. But I think that is like a point in the flavor of club, is that sometimes UFA doubleheaders can be like overly exhausting for the players who are playing lots of points. Again, if you're a player who's playing 7 to 10 points, you're probably fine.
Yeah, especially with the doubleheader adding an extra night of travel.
Mm-hmm.
That's so brutal, because it's common for me to go to a club tournament and honestly sleep really poorly on Friday night
Yeah.
But then sleep great on Saturday because I go to bed at like 8 or 9.
Yeah, the man, back in the old days, I won't get into this too much, but like I remember days where it was like drive up to Madison, play a game, drive up to Minnesota, go to sleep, wake up, play in Minnesota, and immediately drive home after the Minnesota game's over. Like drive through the night, 8.5, 9 hours back to Indy. So like you feel like the next day you just feel so bad. You've had 2 bad nights of sleep, one night where you basically got no sleep. I played 2 tough games. It's just like, it's brutal. Luckily in Indy, I will say this, we only had, in 22 and in 23, we had, I think, 0 doubleheader weekends. They were very intentional about not putting doubleheaders on our schedule. And then you have like Chicago Union last year. They had, I think, 4 straight doubleheader weekends or something crazy like that. And that's a lot. That takes, if I were to have a schedule like that, that would take away from some of my preference for the UFA, because as somebody with a wife and kids, I want to be home as much as possible, but still be able to play Frisbee. So I like a single game, even if it's an away game, like I can go up, play the game and come home. Unless it's Minnesota, that's a little too far, but like I will do the like get home at 3 a.m. from Madison to get home some with my family.
Yeah. I'd be curious though, over the course of a club season versus the course of a UFA season, how much time you spend away from home. Because with a club season, you've got a tournament about once a month. In the UFA, you've got probably a doubleheader once a month, and then probably another like away game, right?
I've never had more than 2 doubleheaders go way back to the early days when we played 16 games and we played every team in our division home and away twice. That was a little different story. Nowadays, with the 12-game schedule, I've only got 6 away games, not including playoffs if we make it. So if we do a doubleheader, I've only got 4 more away games the whole rest of the season. We have never planned multiple doubleheader away trips since COVID. In fact, the last time we did have multiple doubleheader away trips in Indy, I want to say it goes back all the way to like 2016 or 2017. So that's just not the way we've planned things in Indy. But if I were on a team where they were doing that, like that would certainly hamper my availability as a guy in the situation I'm in. So 100%. Now I will say for club, we would go to like 5 tournaments, including sectionals and regionals. Mm-hmm. And those tournaments, because we were pretty focused on like making sure we could do the full UFA thing before the club thing, it's like our club tournaments tended to be pretty close together. So we would have 5 tournaments over the course of 2 months or 2.5 months. And the thing is, every one of those tournaments, I'm gone the whole weekend. So it's like, I'm literally like, I would get no time with my family whatsoever. I would leave either Friday night or very early Saturday and not get back until like my kids are already in bed Sunday night. So for me, it's like really not worth it to do the club stuff. This is like the different life. I think a lot of any other Frisbee players who are parents, like they totally get where I'm coming from. And this like a club tournament, just taking an entire weekend away is really hard from the family. It's just like, it weighs on everybody because it weighs on the kids too. Like you think a lot about my wife and what it does for her, but like when I have had to be gone for the entire weekend for UFA stuff, like my kids miss me. And it's like hard to hear that as a dad when you come home and your son's like, I miss seeing you all weekend. And it's like, I miss you too, buddy. And it's just like, you can't do anything about that. Like time is the thing you can never replace, right? No matter what. I've been very fortunate that in Indy, they have made a schedule that's been like as conducive to being a dad as like, I feel like you can. Club would just be so much harder, especially because it's like if I was playing on a team like Sockeye, I have to go so much further away too. So it would be like an even longer weekend to be able to do something like that. Like if I were to come back and play club, I'd just play something in Indy. Because it's like, for me, kind of like you said, I want to compete and do as well as I can. I want the team to do as well as we can. And like, we almost got to nationals a couple of times with Brickyard when I was playing. We lost in the game to go twice in a row. But there was like something about grinding with my friends, working towards that common goal, like you said, that I really enjoyed. The thing was like that team was also the same guys I was playing Alleycats with. So it was like, we would grind all through that UFA season or the ADL season. And that was awesome. And we would like continue that growth into club season. And like, we were all working and grinding together. And I really enjoy like you said earlier, the team camaraderie aspect of it. I enjoy a ton, which is the reason it's one of the driving forces behind me still playing, because you can't get that. For people who don't play team sports, they don't get it. Like my wife is not a team sport person. She did like cross country, she played tennis, she ran track, like things that are pretty individual. And it's hard to tell people who don't know what it's like to be a part of a team what that feels like. But it's something that once it's gone, it's just gone. Like I'm still grinding at age 37 because I want it to be around for as long as possible. And I dread the day that I'm like too slow and too bad at Frisbee for it to be there anymore.
I'm curious if you've experienced any of that individualism versus like team-based mentality. And I think this is going to be very dependent on the individuals and the teams, because there are individuals who play club who are really self-obsessed, and there are individuals who play UFA who are super team oriented. But I do feel like inherently, because of the immediate statistics and the media coverage, that pushes any person towards caring more about their own success. And I experienced that too when I was in the league. It was like really cool to have my highlights posted and like, always want to look at my stats and compare them to the stats of the other players on the team. And Ultimate is a sport where statistics are really cool and like, still super underutilized. But I did feel like that trended towards what I was saying earlier of people caring more about themselves than they otherwise would.
I think it's one of those things where, John Wooden has the quote where it's like sports don't build, or what is it? Something to the effect of like sports reveal character. Because like who you are really comes out in the setting where you're like being really competitive. And, I always love that people say like, oh, that person's not really a jerk. They're just kind of a jerk when they're playing, playing. And I'm like, well, then that person's a jerk. Like you just described a jerk. So, I think it exacerbates a problem that's already there with the individual. So like if you are really obsessed with like making sure that publicly you look good, or obsessed with like the stats because you feel like those are validating to you in some way, I think what the UFA does is makes that more accessible to you. So it's not creating a problem as much as it is showing the problem that already exists. But it is so much easier. Now, I will say, I'm sure there are certain club teams that keep pretty meticulous statistics, because I know even when I was playing on a mixed team here in Indy, it wasn't like it was super meticulous, but we had like statistics. So someone was keeping track of goals and assists and blocks and stuff like that, and I think turnovers. So that information was available to us, and like you said, it's cool to look at that stuff. Like it's cool to be like, oh, I didn't realize I had 10 assists at the tournament this weekend, or whatever. Or, oh, wow, I got 5 blocks. I didn't even realize. That's cool. But I think that is, if it's a problem in UFA, it's going to be a problem in club. It'll just look different. Because maybe the stats aren't really available. Like you're not going to know like throwing yards, for instance, probably in a club setting, because that's obviously way harder to track. But if somebody really cares individually, I think that comes out in the way they play, and it comes out in the way that they react to situations on the field, and it comes out in the way they treat their teammates. It comes out in the way and how effective they are in tight situations. I think all of those things. I think that people who are the most self-obsessed, and not in every case, but in a lot of cases, also tend to be the ones that don't play very well when the lights are the brightest, because they're so obsessed about the way their image and the way they are perceived. And part of that is tied to the raw numbers that statistics are. But I think that's also something that's coachable. And I try very hard to lead by example with that, because like, look, I'm a guy that's got all the stats in the world. I have more goals than everyone. I have more combined goals and assists than everyone. I've played more games than anyone. Whatever. I could very easily make that my whole identity if I wanted to, especially if like being in Indy, we've never won a title. So maybe it's like I hang my hat on the statistics. But at the end of the day, I'm all about winning. Like, that's the thing I care about the most. That's the thing I try to talk about the most, and the thing I try to relay to my teammates the most. And I think that's like honestly something I showed going to Atlanta. Like, I did not go to Atlanta and try to score as many goals as possible. But I didn't try to take over and like make it about me. And honestly, if I cared just about those things, I would have stayed in Indy, because in Indy I would have, with Rick and Travis and Levi and Nick and Lucas and Xavier and William, like all those guys gone, like there's a pretty big hole there with me being able to just like rack up all the counting stats I ever could have wanted. But that's not what I care about. So I think ultimately that comes down to leadership, that comes down to team culture, because if you ensure that your leadership's preaching we're all about the team, and that the team culture is that people are always talking about how well the team's doing, and especially if you're a team that really prides itself on building other people up and celebrating their successes before you celebrate your own, I think no matter what league you're playing in, or whether it's club or UFA, that you can help other people become the best teammates that they can possibly be. But I think it's also you guys, if memory serves, you guys weren't super successful in the win-loss column when you were playing in for Cascades. Is that?
Yeah, we were not.
So I think on teams like that, it becomes really easy. And I think this is the same in every sport, everywhere. It's really easy to focus just on you when you know that the team is not going anywhere. So if you know you're not making the playoffs, if you know that when the final game of the regular season happens, that's when your season is over, it is way easier to lose focus on the team and to put the focus on your stats, because at least the stats can be a positive you can take away, right? Where like, well, we're not going to win this game. Let me just go see if I can throw. Like, we've all been on a team with this guy. Hey, we're not going to win. So the next time I catch it, I'm going to throw it to the end zone and hope somebody catches it, because like, might as well try something cool. Might as well see if I get a highlight. But like, one thing I was always proud of us in Indy for is when we made the playoffs the first 3 years, and then we went 3 years straight without making the playoffs. But I feel like during that time, there was a focus on the process of getting better, and not a process on, and like, sure, at the end of the season, you might be like, oh, cool, I had this many goals and assists. And like, that was fun to talk about and fun to think about, but because you didn't have anything else to talk about because you weren't in the playoffs. But, there was a process of like trying to get better and realize, hey, we're out of the playoffs, but what we're doing right now is something we can use to build for next season. But that requires the leadership preaching that requires the players believing in that and believing that what you're doing now is going to benefit you next season. I'm not trying to rub salt in the wound, but I know like a few years ago, Sockeye didn't make nationals, which like, I don't feel that bad for you. I've never made nationals. So like, I don't feel that bad saying that, but obviously something good came out of that, because the team that Sockeye was this past year is vastly improved from that Sockeye team. And if there wasn't a team focus and it did become very me-centered, I'm guessing that those players either weren't a part of the program anymore, or eventually had to buying into what the team needs. And so then you guys were able to kind of overcome any of that if it was there. So
I would agree that good things did come out of it. I don't know if those good things were because we didn't make nationals, or good things that would have happened regardless, but yeah.
No, I get what you're saying though. Like, there are plenty of people who like the stats mean way too much to them. That's a dangerous place to be in.
I'm curious about something else you said too. You were talking about the watchability of UFA versus men's club. And I mean, definitely like in terms of pace of play, UFA is far easier to watch. Like, there aren't, we've all watched a competitive club game and people make calls and it goes back and forth for a while. I will say, and I am guessing this is an opinion that is more commonly held by Ultimate players and not by people who don't play Ultimate. I love listening to those conversations. When the observers are mic'd up and the players are arguing with each other, I think that is incredibly entertaining.
But I don't think it's entertaining for the right reasons. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to say I have not been entertained by that stuff, but it's usually because I'm like one person. I feel like there's always one person who's so wrong that you're almost like for me, I'm like cringing. I'm like, oh, I don't know if this person doesn't know how wrong they are, because again, it's hard. Frisbee's a hard sport to officiate from a third person perspective, let alone a first person perspective. On like, especially these bang bang things. There have been times where I have been sure, like in a UFA or ADL game, that like I was in the right, and then I'll go watch the film. And I'm like, oh, I was so wrong. But like in the moment, I am positive I'm right. But yeah, like I feel like the reason, for me at least, that they can be entertaining from time to time is like kind of because if you understand what's going on, you understand how one person is just really wrong and one person is definitely right. And that it's like the kind of the satire of like you're in on the joke, but the person isn't in on the joke, I guess.
Yeah. So from like a non-ultimate player perspective, I'm sure the UFA would be more engaging in that regard. I guess I'm curious, like, I don't think this is a stat that they're tracking, but I would love to know how many non-ultimate players watch, like, have a UFA TV subscription.
Sure. I know one thing that's cool here in Indy that we've done. I know in Atlanta, they have the Peachtree Network, which is like an actual local like TV station, and they broadcast some of their games on the Peachtree Network. So like, I know here, this is really cool. In Indy, we had our games rebroadcast on Sunday during like it's like 12 p.m. or 1 p.m. spot on our local ABC affiliate. And when we started doing that, it was the most watched sporting event on TV during that time frame. Like, because this is the summer, right? So like, what's on during the summer? Baseball, which, especially we have a AAA team here in Indianapolis. We don't have an MLB team, right? So everyone's like a Cincinnati Reds fan or a Chicago Cubs, Chicago White Sox fan, right? Or a Cardinals fan or something. But it was like the most watched thing, and like we're getting like hundreds of thousands of people watching it. Like I have people come up to me all the time. This is really cool. Where they'll be like, they'll see me wearing Alleycats. I'm like, I saw you guys on TV. I was like, I didn't know what I was watching, but I just like stopped and watched the rest of the game. Like, so I think it does depend on the market. And it depends on like what efforts your team is making to get the content out there where people are going to see it. Because that's the thing, like picking that time slot Sunday afternoon during the summer, like was very strategic and worked out really well for us, because like what's on at 12 p.m. on a Sunday during the summer, if people are just like flipping channel looking for something and they see Frisbee, oh, that's cool. Is that happening everywhere? Definitely not. But I would also, I wish there was a way to like know that. I do know we've had a lot of like fans who come to our games in Indy who are not Frisbee people, heard about it, and now they're like season ticket holders every season. So that is cool. But even as a Frisbee player, it's just hard for me to watch. It is the pace of play thing. It's like in UFA, there's you got the 40 seconds between points. Timeouts are 1 minute. Like it's nice and quick.
Well, timeouts are 70 seconds in club.
Yeah, 70 seconds.
Okay. It depends on if there are observers present or not.
Exactly. So an observed game is much easier to watch than a non-observed game. For a lot of the same reasons, it's easier to watch UFA because of the refs, and it kind of speeds things up. I was somebody, by the way, I played in several observed games, not as many as you have for sure, but I was always someone that like if I made a call and it was contested, or vice versa, if I was contesting a call, I always sent it straight to the observer. I was not wasting time talking it out, because the talking it out, like it very rarely changes anyone's mind. And in my mind, I'm always like, I think I made the right call. This guy thinks he made the right call. Like there's no point in like getting mad about it. I would just send it to a neutral party and be like, hey, we don't agree, make the call. And so I always treated the observers essentially like they were a ref. I was just like, you do it.
I do feel like I would argue that is an unspirited move in the way that spirit of the game is defined in Ultimate, which is also a highly subjective thing. Like personally, like I think that like I would argue that having an observer and like talking things through between players will result in more accurate calls than a ref. Because like an observer basically is a ref, right? They can always just come in and make a ruling.
Sure.
And so when I'm playing, even though, making the game watchable, it brings more people into the sport, which is great and gives more opportunities to the sport. If that's happening. And, but like when I'm a player, I don't care about the game being watchable. I'm just like, I want to get the call right. And I do think that refs in the UFA miss so many calls, because like we were saying, it is a really hard sport to officiate. And that is why I just have such a strong preference for an observer over a ref. And if there is no observer, obviously that is a system that can be abused. Personally, I think it is in my experience, I feel like it is far less likely that a player will abuse that system, even though it does happen sometimes, and more likely that a ref will make a bad call, and have a bigger impact on the game, or like multiple bad calls. I feel like, I guess I'm saying, I think the game is more impacted by bad calls made by refs in the UFA versus bad calls made by players in club. Although you will have a game every once in a while with no observers where it's like, that was the worst experience of my life, and I'm going to let this dictate my entire perception of every other club game that I've ever played.
For sure. I think, so there's it's funny, there's a lot of rules we haven't even touched on that are like I really love the ability to like sub people out on timeout. I love that you can move after a foul call and stuff like that. Especially
one of the most annoying things in Ultimate is like, okay, hold up, everyone go back to your spot.
Where were you? And like, nobody knows. You're all guessing, right? But I think the other thing is like, I think one way where I really felt like in club, they do impact the game. And I don't think people think about it this way, but like, if I make a call, even if I ultimately end up saying, you know what, you can test it, and I'm like, you know what, you were right. Okay. I still stopped the flow of the game to make that call. And that can be more impactful than actually getting the call right. Like,
there are some situations where if I've got a power position huck after an up line, if someone fouls me, like even if they don't contest the foul, that like I just refer to that as like a cheater move.
100%.
Does happen sometimes, there will be players out there who foul intentionally, but no system I think is going to result in perfection. I feel like
for sure
the refs are just like very far away in terms of the calls that are made. And
I think also in the UFA, it depends on the quality of the reffing crew you have. Like the reffing crew we have at championship weekend, I think they always do a phenomenal job. And yeah, they're going to miss things, but like, I don't think they miss anything humongous. Like if they miss something, it's a bang, bang play where like it would have been just as easily missed if the two players were making the call, because it's bang, bang, and you're going to think you're right and they're going to think they're right. I think sometimes, you do get we had a reffing crew up in Minnesota at our regular season away game this year that might have been the worst reffing crew I've ever had. And it was like several people who were pretty new. And it was like kind of crazy that for this marquee game, we had this. I mean, it was to the point where the commentators, Lepler and Eisenhuber commentated. So it was like they had the national crew. And I know they try really hard on the broadcast not to talk about the refs too much when it's like the national broadcast. And even they were like commenting on it, which is not a good sign. So it can be 100% frustrating. I think it can be frustrating in both sports. Like you said, no perfect system. I think the thing, going back to just like the rule part though, where it's like aside from the refs, I feel like when there's a foul, like you said, nobody knows where anyone really was. Nobody knows exactly like anything that's going on. I think you should just be allowed to move. Because
I could get behind that for club.
Yeah. When you're coming into like a completely static position where there's no movement, that is advantage defense every time. Because when you're not, the hardest thing to do as a defender, no matter what, if you're playing club or UFA, is to guard an offense that is in a flow state where the disc is moving quickly, it's moving laterally, it's moving vertically, like it's just kind of moving, and you can never really find your footing and get to the perfect spot you want to defensively because the disc is just moving too quickly. And when you take literally all movement away, because the other thing is like maybe you go to the same spot you were in, but like everyone can turn their hips now to the right way they want to be turned. You can
position, can talk to each other.
And the defense can like, hey, I'm over the top, we're bracket, whatever. Like you can kind of figure all that out, which is so much harder, obviously, in the flow of a game. And so I hate the static position after that. Most of the rules I don't have too much of a problem with. Like when it comes to the rules themselves, I think like both the games are pretty good. I do think at the elite level for all divisions and club, I think 10 seconds is just too long. Like I think 10 seconds was great, 20 years ago and before when people were worse at throwing, didn't understand the game. The athletes weren't as smart and explosive as they are now. I think in today's game, 10 seconds is so long. And I know you mentioned earlier, like sometimes people count really fast and it's actually less than 10. But the thing is, I can always call a fast count if you are going faster.
Yeah, but I feel like it's so normalized that an 8-second stall count feels normal to everyone. Like I think I called a fast count maybe like 2 or 3 times this entire club season. And I'm guessing, I don't know. If you're listening to this, go and do your own research, watch a club game, and then count every stall. I guess
that'd be interesting.
I guess you actually have to find stalls.
That'd be hard.
Yeah, which doesn't happen very often.
And then how often was it a real stall? But it was contested and whatever. But yeah. I feel like we've been talking about this really. Justin, is there anything you're curious about in like this? And again, to be fair, like I said, I would be playing club right now if I had the time. So like, this isn't like don't go play club or anything like that. But Justin, is there anything you didn't hear us address or that you wanted to hear more on a certain topic that Manny and I talked about?
To me, the big thing that stood out was it sounds like back to the game planning thing. It sounds like it's a difference between like the NFL and a football model versus an NBA model, and just kind of what you come down to valuing. So like Cam, it sounds like for you value the football model of like you have a game over the weekend, you have the entire week to prepare for that game. Whereas like the NBA, the pro basketball league that I work in now, and like kind of club is just like you game plan, but you don't actually have time to like implement it. Like I know we had a walkthrough and scouting for a team that we played like later that day, and that was the first time that we talked about them. The NBA doesn't practice, and then club is also kind of similar. And so I don't know, I think it's just kind of 2 different extremes. And it sounds like you both kind of value like 1 being able to put it into practice versus 2 just like conceptualizing it and seeing if you can actually execute it.
To be clear, I do think there is a tremendous amount of game planning for a tournament like club nationals.
It's similar to the NBA, actually. Like we're like during the regular season, there's not as much, but then when the playoffs hit, it's like now we're really getting into the adjustments from game to game and all those things, because like the regular season's just kind of about making it to the playoffs, whereas kind of similar to like, let's be real, there aren't a lot of surprises at nationals every year for who makes it. You get like you might get a couple teams in each division, but like most of the teams you can kind of earmark for club nationals at the beginning of the club season without getting too much wrong. And yeah, like I really do like the weekly, like that's really big. I think one thing too is I really love the availability of film for the UFA. Like that's something like, as somebody who just like, and this is me being old and growing up in an era where there was just less filmed Frisbee in general, but like once we started having our games filmed, I could actually go back and watch it and like first off, watch it for enjoyment, because it's like kind of cool to like see yourself playing Frisbee. And I had never really seen that before. But then like as I became a little bit more experienced and kind of knew more about Frisbee, like being able to like really break down what I did well and what opportunities I missed and things like that. And being able to have like the good high angles that you get from a UFA broadcast versus like whenever we did record stuff for like club, it was like field level, not always the best angle, you're missing stuff. And like, so
you need the Ala mode camera setup.
Yeah. All about like that.
For Sockeye this year, we bought a drone. Well, I bought a drone, and then we filmed almost every single practice. It was a game changer. And I know a lot more teams are doing that nowadays. Mm-hmm. Of course, a drone is a serious monetary investment. So it's like, generally the pretty well-established programs like, I know that we had players on Carleton who filmed their practice. I think Slow is Cal Poly is filming some of their practices.
We did hustle. We had our guy Jarrett, man. He was on it. He had the drone, and he would get the footage out like later that same day. So we would for our training camps, we had 4-hour practice Saturday, 4-hour practice Sunday, and within a few hours of Saturday's practice being over, he would have the film up from that day, so we could like go look at it, look at clips, and make adjustments for like the next practice. So
yeah. Sometimes I would upload it before we left the fields if we were hanging out afterwards.
Manny, the real MVP over here, MVP on and off the field.
But I do think it's a game changer. And it's so much easier to give feedback to players and give yourself feedback and talk about things you see on the fields. Because like when we're playing Frisbee, even when we're just watching Frisbee from the sideline, we miss 95+% of things that are happening on the fields. And there have been so many times this summer where I was like, wow, this player really messed this up. And when I go back and watch on the film, I'm like, there were so many other circumstances that like made this happen that I had no idea about. And, maybe that player actually didn't do anything wrong at all.
I have a question for you that I can't believe we haven't hit on when it comes to club. And I think this is like coaches. There are definitely club teams where it feels like, first off, a lot of club teams don't have coaches. Let's just start there. Now, your higher level teams probably are all going to have coaches, but like mid, low level, a lot of them don't. So like that's obviously one big difference is like even if it's you have a coach in the UFA in some capacity. What is your experience with coaches at club level? And I know that your experience is not going to be everyone's experience because I definitely, from hearing from other people and kind of even you can kind of watch sometimes and kind of see it happening, it feels like it is more common in club for a coach to be maybe not really the coach, like he's coach in name, but like the coaches are really the players versus I feel like in the UFA, at least my experience and some experience from multiple other teams, like the coach is the coach. Yeah, they're taking feedback from players, but like they're the ones like with final say, they're the ones kind of like running the ship.
I definitely think that is true for club. Like club teams tend to be more player led. In pro, when I was playing for Cascades and we had X10 coaching, he was also the team owner and like the GM, he had a lot of responsibilities. So he wasn't actually doing that much coaching and we kind of just didn't have a coach. But I would agree that in club, like, and I mean, Sockeye has stated this, that we want to be a player driven team, even though I'm super appreciative of our coaches and all the work they did this year.
I love being coached hard. Like I love a coach challenging me and like even not just challenging me to like do something better or to like raise my game to a new level, but like challenging even like the way I think about things. I think I have a lot of experience and I'm probably never going to be really wrong about something when it comes to like strategy or what we should have done in a certain situation, but that doesn't mean that I'm all the way right every time. And I like when a coach is willing to like challenge me on those things and like present other ideas and like challenge me to try something different. I think a lot of Frisbee is held back by their hesitance to take coaching from somebody who wasn't an elite player. If you look at any sport, like any other professional sport, yes, there are coaches who were very good players and are very good coaches. But like when you think about the greatest coaches of all time in a lot of sports, they were not like elite professional athletes. And I think that is something that the Frisbee world is like slow to like trust, that somebody who wasn't a very elite player themselves can also like teach them something new. And I think it's something that is holding Frisbee back, as not everywhere, but like holistically, if we're looking at the full picture of Frisbee, there are a lot of places where it is holding people back because like our new coach in Indy, he is not an elite level Frisbee player. I'm really excited. He did coach college basketball. He's been a coach in like he was a track coach. Like he has coaching experience, like real coaching experience. He is firm, but he's open to ideas. He will listen to everything, test it out if he's not sure about it before he like says yes or no. Like he treats things like I guess like a real coach. And he studies the game constantly. And I think I would love for the Frisbee community as a whole for people who play on like high level teams, I would love for the people who maybe are up on their high horse to get off of it and realize that there are things we can learn from people who maybe weren't as talented as we were, but like there is so much of the game that like it's just like any other sport. You can be an expert on something without ever having been an elite player at it. And this isn't saying like Sockeye now has to go get a coach and you have to listen to like what's percent, right? Like you have chosen to be a player-led team. I think that's fine. But I think in general, whether it's UFA or club, if you're going to have a coach, I would love to see that coach actually be able to be the coach and for players to be the players. And I think there's still some hesitance in that.
Yeah. To be clear, like our coaches call lines, give players feedback. It's more about like, player, like our captains and coaches that have kind of similar levels of say in things. And we talk about things together a lot. Yeah. I agree. I just think that, that is kind of a product of how information is transmitted in the sport of ultimate and the lack of, mainstream online strategitic content. Because if you want to go, like, if you want to learn more about a mainstream sport, then you can just go online, the YouTube channel, B-Ball Breakdown. I used to watch those videos all the time when I was in high school and obsessed with the NBA. And you can learn a lot about the game. And in ultimate, that information is not like intentionally gatekept, maybe sometimes intentionally gatekept, but it's more just like, it's so much more easily accessible if you are a player at a high level. So, and it also goes back to like our conversation of how many ultimate fans out there are not ultimate players, and how many people who want to like become obsessed with the sport and be really smart about it haven't played the game at a high level. So it's like, I don't think I would never say that like you can't be a really smart person if you're not a great athlete. But just kind of like the way that ultimate currently works, there are far more barriers to become a knowledgeable ultimate coach if you haven't played at a high level.
I mean, this was something I heard in Atlanta. I'm not going to like call any individual person out, but like I heard this from multiple players in Atlanta about like, oh, so-and-so, what do they know? They never played high level Frisbee. And I'm like, that's not how things work. Like you can know things without having been the best at it. Like kind of like you said, like the physical capacity that you had is not the same as the mental capacity you have for something. Like those two things are vastly different from each other. You can have both at a high level or both not at a high level, but I think you're right. I think like it is like a product of culture. And I think the other thing is because there's such a lack of content in general when you compare it to like other, like the NFL, for instance, people just assume because the people who produce the content are high level players. So then they assume that like, oh, I have to like listen to what this person said because they're a high level player and like they're going to know everything. And that's not true. I've listened to some high level players say some stuff that I wholly disagree with. And like, and I'd be like, no, that's just wrong. Like some things I feel objectively wrong. Some things might be more a matter of opinion.
And there are many high level Frisbee players who are idiots as well.
100%. I can tell you about several. So it's just like, just because you are really good at like doing something does not mean you're really good at like thinking about it. I love telling the story. So this is a funny example. When we went to championship weekend in 2019, we had to play against the New York Empire in the semifinals, and they were undefeated. And for those who, this wasn't the Ryan Osgard New York Empire for those who maybe are newer to following the UFA, but this is Grant Lindsley was on that team. This was shortly after Jack Williams had gotten there. Ben Yacht was the MVP. Harper Garvey played on that team. So, if you're a Pony fan, you probably know that name. But when we were going to play them, obviously they were undefeated and it was going to be a tough game. One of our captains that year decided, he sent an email to the other captains and our coach, and I was one of the captains that year. So I saw this where it was like, hey, I was thinking we should switch like these people over to D line for this game so we can try to slow down their offense. because their offense is so good. And then maybe that can kind of give us a better chance of like winning the game if we can kind of put this person on like Babbitt or put this person on Jack and put this person on Grant, whatever. And our coach just responded back with, so you want to completely, we had like a top like 2 offense in the league, like 2 or 3 offense in the league. It wasn't like we couldn't score points. So they were like, so you want to abandon the thing that's made us so successful this year in order to try something we haven't tried at all in hopes that it might work. And it's
Part
like
of that UFA game planning. You should have done that the week before.
And it's like, well, when you put it that way, well, this was like 3 weeks before the game or something. This was like right after we clinched our spot. And it was just like, why would we do that? You want to take like 3 guys off of our top 3 O-line in the league, just remove them off the O-line and be like, oh, the O-line will be fine without like half of the people that are supposed to be on it, and move them over to D-line where they have no chemistry with anyone, and like see if we can like makeshift this thing. Like, no, this makes no sense. We lost that game by 2. It was a close game. So like but like that's just like, this was a very good player suggesting this. Like, and it was just like, that doesn't make any sense. Why would you? We've been so successful in this area and you want to take that away. It doesn't make any sense, right? So it's just like, to your point, you could be very good at Frisbee and just have crazy thoughts that make no sense.
Some of those people have a lot of followers on social media.
Oh, well, that ain't me. I don't have any social media. So
Edit that part out, Justin.
Keep it in. In fact, dub a name over what he said. I don't.
I know for me, like it was for the longest time before I started posting, the big barrier for me was like that I'm not a nationals level player, anything like that. I talk about Frisbee, but I talk about it in the context of strength and conditioning. Even for me, I was like, people aren't going to listen to me because I'm not a nationals level player. So I can definitely, you definitely see more people that like are starting to post a little bit more that aren't like their entire thing isn't that I'm a nationals player, but yeah, it's definitely still not there yet. I hate to bring us to a close here, but we've hit pretty much 2 hours, which I think is a good amount of time.
My high school practice started 4 minutes ago. I just texted the other coaches to get things started without me.
Okay, this is my fault. This happens with me. I talk too much. It's my fault. I don't get to talk Frisbee that much, and like so I nerd out about it when I do. But Justin, thank you for having me. Manny, it was great to actually get to talk with you and not just talk with you through Justin.
Yeah, Justin, let's do that Copenhagen challenge. Not the ISO long lunge challenge.
That'll be next. People that have listened this far, definitely stay tuned for that. But yeah, Cam, thanks so much for being here. Manny, thanks for being here. For everybody listening, thank you guys for sticking with us this far.
Thanks for hosting, Justin.